Here's the thing about your movie, why I made a curator's pick of the Hollywood Fringe Festival. Community, heart,
Welcome back. Nothing but the facts. We're here again. Your truth seekers, always trying to keep you connected to what's going on. A beautiful Friday here in Las Vegas. Got a lot of energy. It's a late registration day for those who just want to register on time to get into the candidacy of federal, Congress? All of them. As you see, we got another truth seeker in the house. We'll go through our original preliminaries. Hello, welcome to us. Check us out. Lord Land Films, we're doing it up right. And you can always check us out on YouTube, Lord Land Films. See what's going on because we're bringing it to you. It's your host, Student Verley, after the jizzle, whatever you want to call me. People call me stuff this week. We'll get into that because I've been called out.
You have?
I've been called out. They called it my name. But anyway, sitting here with my man Crazy D. What up, man?
Hey, what's going on? Make sure that you, like Ceemo says, subscribe, like, share all of the videos. Nothing but the facts. And here he is, Student Verley. They already getting calls already.
It's already like that. I'm keeping my true format because I do this at the radio station, so it's a habitual thing. But there we go.
And make sure that you subscribe and also follow and like our Instagram pages, our individual Instagram pages, our Facebook pages, all that. You'll see that at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to shoot it over there to the man in charge of the sound.
Hello, I go by the name of Ceemo, where on this segment I turn into the young sponge and just absorb and reflect on all the information that these two amazing guys spread over to me. And today our special guest.
As you would know, anytime an African American registers to vote is important. But when you register to run for an office, that's a significant difference in terms of your faith, character, and hopefully your fulfillment of your American dream. And today in Nevada was the last day that anybody could file to run for anything in the upcoming election, which will be in 2019. Is it 19 or 20? No, I'm kidding. It's right now, 18, y'all. Everybody got all serious. It's right now. We just want to let you know, if you're not registered and you're checking us out, there's a reason you're checking us out. And you're checking us out so you will get registered. Because after you hear the dialogue this brother's putting forth, I'm sure you want to support him in the form of the 4th District, which is the federal district here. That's a federal seat, y'all. That means Washington. So that in any event, we're seeking to elect and find out more information about this individual who wants to get your vote to go to D.C. to represent the 4th District here in Nevada.
And before you say his name, let's say that he has truly served his country.
Oh yeah, he got blown up.
Yeah, that's
you gotta laugh at it or else you'll cry about it.
Yeah, he is truly a Purple Heart recipient.
Awardee.
That's right. So we want to say and introduce none other than
our future congressman from the 4th District, Mr. Rodney Smith, who has been running. He even got his nice shoes on today, so he ain't running too fast. But we're glad to slow him down because he's fresh on the heels of just having registered his name to be one of the people seeking your vote for the 4th District. So again, thank you for your service. Thank you for your time. Welcome to Nothing But the Facts.
Hello.
Nothing but the facts. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on here, and I look forward to sharing with you all some of my facts.
Well, fact on, because what happens is
we
recognize that in this campaign, a lot of people get different favors in terms of publicity that they get, in terms of fundraisers that they may have, and they get the notice out there through mass media. Well, mass media doesn't always affect the melanated individuals, so we got to take the means into our own hand. Mr. Smith has been pounding the pavement as a regular basis, even prior to this election. So do know that we're glad to have this time. As I said, he just registered. So how did that feel? Registering, I mean.
So I just want you fellas to think about this, and everybody out there. I'm 3rd generation freeborn in my family.
What you gonna do with some freedom?
That means that not too many generations ago, my great-grandfather was a slave in this country. Now, he was a slave and he couldn't read or write. When he was freed, he wound up purchasing some land about 50 miles up the road from where he was enslaved at, about 15 years after that. And it's a property that we still live on today. And it's actually where my mother, the house there that my grandfather built, was a house that my mother was born in. And it's also the house that I was raised in the beginning of my years. And it was the Jim Crow South when I came along. You know, I wasn't even a full citizen when that happened. And I'm trying to draw a picture here that I went from not too many generations ago where my people were enslaved to living in the same house that my grandfather built, to now my mother was the first person in the history of my family to graduate college. My older brother was the first person in the history of our family to get a master's degree. And today, I just signed to represent Nevada's 4th Congressional District as the Congressperson. So I want to show you just how far we have come, and though that journey is still going. So how did it make me feel? It made me feel like the ancestors were touching me, and that the ancestors was out there dancing, crying, but there were tears of joy because they've seen the suffering that they went through and see me now today using that as a stepping stone, not only for myself, but hopefully to empower the people in my community, and specifically the African American people in this community, because the Nevada's 4th Congressional District is where the majority of African Americans are located in this state. And they're going to see a great grandchild, a great grandson of a slave who was competing to represent them in Washington, D.C. So I feel empowered. I feel motivated. Actually, I'm a little anxious because I want to make it happen. But this is our time now, and it's what are we going to do with? So I've done that part, you know. And I'm asking for the ball to carry it, but the ball that I'm asking for is what do we want? And you have to tell people what it is that you want if you have an expectation of ever receiving it. And oftentimes when we have told people what we wanted, they ignored us, or in some cases they simply didn't understand because they're so far removed from it. So I'm saying today, as of today, just a couple of hours ago, this community, Nevada's 4th Congressional District, and I'm going to take it a step further, because when you're in Congress, not only are you representing your congressional district, you're representing your state, and ultimately the votes that we take impact people across this whole country. And what they will have, what we will have with me, is I didn't register as a traditional Democrat or a Republican. I registered as a nonpartisan. This is a paradigm shift that's going on, and I'm at that great grandson of a slave is at the forefront of that paradigm shift.
Well, let's get into it then. Okay. Claude Anderson has a new book out. It's called The Black History Reader. In the book, he speaks on how the American dream was really if you were an immigrant coming to this country, you know, and you could pass for being what was considered white. You could come here and get land for free long as you had property. So that means that the immigrants would come here, they would have money, and the property were African bodies, black bodies. Thus, they could get land beforehand. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they said, let me have so much acreage of land for free. Now, you spoke on how your grandfather, great-grandfather, purchased land. However, he purchased land from people who got the land for free because they had property, which automatically puts us behind the 8 ball already because, well, not the 8 ball, I would say behind the white ball. Because...
You mean behind the cue ball?
No, the white ball. I'm going to keep it real. But so what I'm saying is these people got land for free. We have to purchase land. So what do we as a people really want?
Well, the what do we want is definitely a question that we have to formulate an answer to. Because I can say what I want and what I think people want, and that can be a starting place. But ultimately, we need to utilize the brain trust of us all to determine what we want. Now, what I like to think about, well, I don't actually like to think about it, but what's the reality of America, is I tell people, if you want to know what it's like for people like my great-grandfather who had to do that, is just imagine you're playing a game of Monopoly. And everybody starts out with $200 or however much it is. I think it's $1,500. Everybody starts out with that except you. And everybody gets a turn at the dice except you. And they get multiple turns at that dice through the generations. And they acquire, buy, however they get it, all of the property on that board, with maybe the exception of Baltic and Mediterranean. And then after multiple generations, or in this case, turns of the die, finally black people get to roll the dice. Now they don't have any money, and they don't own anything. And the first place that they land is on somebody else's property, and they don't have any money to pay for that rent. And they still have to somehow figure out how to pay for it. So from the very beginning, the system was set up with us. First of all, we were slaves, and then when we were free, we were just one step up from, because we didn't own anything. Nor did we have knowledge, reading and writing skills, because it was against the law to teach us. So Robert E. Lee, with Grant, actually had said that the African, because that's what they called us then, would not stand a chance in America with their newfound freedom if they were not given the benefits that everybody else had, which meant given land, and given means free, that they were, he actually was what people today would call socialism. He said that Africans that were becoming Americans would need health care. He said they would need some jobs, same thing we're talking about today. And he also said they needed to repatriate husband and wives together, families. This is Robert E. Lee who said this. And to this day, really, that still hasn't happened. So we're still behind, and we're behind because that is a design. But I will say this: have a good heart, because my great grandfather purchased land back then with no education and didn't even own himself. Today, much more than him, we have education, we own our own clothes. Many of us, not as many as need be, have jobs. I'm not saying that things are perfect, but I'm saying that if my great grandfather could do that back then yes, there are reasons that can hold us back and slow us down, but there is absolutely no reason that keeps us back. And as a representative, there are barriers that they've been legally erected that prevent us from reaping the many benefits that this country has to offer everybody else but us. My job is to find those barriers, at least one of them is to find those barriers, and then to knock them down so that we can enter that land of prosperity just like everybody else.
Okay, well, in his Black History Reader, he also speaks to, in around I may have the years wrong, 1867 or 1875, there were rules of conduct written for the Congress and the Senate, where when black politicians came in to be seated, they could not speak to black issues. In other words, they could not put the fault at the hands of the people that they would be sitting beside, the white senators and the white congresspersons. And this law still is on, this rule of conduct is still enacted today, still enforced today in the Senate and the House. How do you, as a person who we hear you speak and you talk about the black plight, how would you be able to circumvent, how would you be able to get around something that is there that says that as black people you can toe the company line, you can be in the party system, you can be in that club of, okay, you're more liberal, so you would probably vote with Democrat more than you would vote with Republican, but either way, how do you get around that which is set there? That's why, to me, the Congressional Black Caucus toes the Democrat line, but they speak nothing directly to direct the change what's happening to black people. So how do you get around that?
Well, first of all, we often associate Democrats with pro-blackness. And that is the first myth that we have to bust. We can talk about it. And I want to make sure again that we get this delineation of Democratic Party and blackness is two different things. The Congressional Black Caucus, they're Democrats. They Democrats first before they are black. Look, I'm black every day. I look in the mirror, I see black. I am a descendant of a slave. I said that at the beginning. I'm not walking away from that. Matter of fact, I look at that as a badge of honor because I am still here. So unless they cut my mic off, unless they take that paper, that document, and say you cannot present it, which is not true, I'm going to present it. As a matter of fact, I've even said that it's not the only policy that I have, but black issues will be at the forefront of the things that I'm going to do. And if no one else has picked up that bill to introduce the study for reparations, then I will do it for the study of reparations. But we have to get something straight. There is not one person that can do it all by themselves. And if people have an expectation that any of us can go there and do it by ourselves, then they're in for a rude awakening. No, I am running to represent the people. So that means the people tell me what they want. And if the people say, Rodney, we want these things, whether you call it reparations or it's smaller things, it's the same thing, but it's instead of eating a whole cow at one setting, we just take it in steaks. Okay, well, let's take it in steaks. And then let's submit those bills. And this is not necessarily about accusing. I don't have to accuse anybody to present the facts. The facts are, as of today, that with the exception of Native Americans, the African American man, specifically man, is the most downtrodden person or group of people in this country. And then it's the African American people in general, which includes our women. That is a fact. There is no one on earth that will stop this black man from speaking the facts in regards to our people and regards to the needs of all the people. And if there is a rule like that on the books, then what I'm asking the people to do, and other representatives that's out there, let's call them out. And if it is I think it was John Kennedy that said, if it was made by man, then it can be fixed by man. And I'm going to move forward with that attitude and dare them. No, not dare them, because I'm not that. Just give them, I will give them the opportunity to accept what I'm saying or to be exposed for all to see. And then you, the citizens, the brothers and sisters, and the sympathetic others that are out there, then you all are going to have to make up your minds. Are you going to let that brother get in the halls by himself? Or are you going to get on the phones and call your representatives to say that this is something that's important to you? So again, this is not just me, and I want to make sure that the people's voice is heard, and that's my job. That ball that I'm carrying, that's the people's voice. I'm carrying it, brother. So again, this is not just me. If we want it, look, see this hat? This hat is representative of a bunch of people who are not here today because they gave their lives. I almost gave my life, brother. And I got a second chance at life. And I'm going to live that life to the fullest and trying to do the most that I can with the life that I have left in me. And a part of that. So I'm not scared of dying because I have seen death, brother. I'm not scared of it. What can they do to me? They can do nothing to me other than tell me no. And you know, women say if you want it, ask. And if you ask enough times, eventually you might get a yes. Well, I'm going for the yes.
I did have a quick question before we get too far. And first off, Mr. Rodney Smith, I want to say thank you for your service.
Yes,
I appreciate that. My dad was a Vietnam veteran, so I appreciate everyone who has and still fighting for the country. Your opening statement, you said the barriers, you're talking about barriers you want to break. And then you also brought up how certain minorities couldn't get land, and the ones who could get land, they either shared it with their family or sold it to friends. So people like us were left off with nothing. We grew up in, I heard it was called a red zone. We grew up in a red zone. We couldn't get the wages that we needed, and then we were just stuck in a loop of debt or just couldn't get ahead. My question is, how can we advocate younger folks to want to learn about owning property, owning anything, because a lot of us, we don't want to go to school to get the education to know how to own our own things. We want to either get money tomorrow, get the fast money, or just spend the rest of our life doing a 9 to 5. How can we advocate, I guess, education, and then learning and getting wealth off that?
Well, again, I think we have to do some myth busting here, because education, first of all, is not just about going to school. If you know how to read, then there's plenty of books out there that can give you all the information that you need. My grandmother taught me how to read. I think I was 4 years old, because she was losing her sight and she loved that good book, and she needed somebody to read that book to her. So she taught me how to read. And then when she lost her sight, I read. But we didn't have a bunch of books where I'm from. So I had to read school books, because we didn't have novels. So I read school books, and I read my older brother's school books, my older cousin's school books. So at a really early age, I had information that was years more advanced than what I was in years. So for people who want to learn a thing, first of all, you would student early. Just being, and no, I'm real here, because one of the things, the tradition of my family was they told stories of the history of our family. And those are stories that I carry with me today. And so one of the things that happened to me when I came is I met Sam Smith. And Sam Smith was a storyteller. And he might tell the same story over and over again. It wasn't until later that I realized he was telling to make sure I got him. There wasn't nothing wrong with his memory. He was making sure my memory was right. So what I'm saying is, a simple thing that we all can do is, if I want to learn about video, and I know poquito más, a little bit, but if I want to learn more about video, Crazy D, can you let me work with you? Or can you got some time to share some things? If I want to learn about sound, now that I know you do sound, I got somebody else in my Rolodex, brother, that I can go to. When I want some knowledge on Kemet that I may not know, because I do know 1 or 2 things, but I know Franklyn knows 3 or 4 things. Franklyn, hook me up, brother, and share a little bit. When Franklyn want to know about comic books and Black Panther, Franklyn says, hey, I got a guy, because he knew people that he could get that information from. So, I guess the point I'm trying to make is most of the things that we need, we already have it. It's true. How do we maximize the use of what we have at whatever level that we have to take us to the next level? And Franklyn, this brother, he got me by a couple of years, I think. But in wisdom, he probably has me by a generation. So I listen to Franklyn because he knows something that I don't know. Now, I may know one thing that he don't know, and he'll ask me about it. That's mutual respect. Yeah. Well, right there, we both just got elevated. So I'm saying, all of the young folks out there, brothers and sisters, talk to people that's around you, even your peers. Go get some books. Matter of fact, the library have them for free, and you can find a bunch of them online for free.
So basically,
it's still free.
Utilize resources and reach out.
Always.
That's why I'm here on this podcast. Nothing but the facts, man. I love it. Thank you.
But when you think about your service and representing your service to the country, at this level, giving at the federal level to the needs of this particular community, the demographics are just not the best. Whether you come downstate or upstate, this is one of the poorer congressional districts.
A portion of it is poor, but it's actually one of our better congressional districts as far as finances.
Well, in Nevada, but not in the country.
Right.
But as you look at that, do you think that bringing resources to this place that is not so economically strong, will make a difference? I mean, not that it will make a difference, but that you can make a difference to bring the economics here to make this place better.
We're going to do some more myth busting. That's going to be the theme for me today, is myth busting. People often talk about we have to have better economics before anything else to get those other things. And to a certain extent, there is some truth to that, but it is not the entire truth. The reality of it is, the reason why lobbyists get paid so much money and businesses pay so much money to lobbyists,
I'd like to know,
is because those businesses pay those lobbyists to come to people in Congress to get those people in Congress to pass bills where the businesses can make more money. That's real. If you want, go to the legislative session right here in Nevada, and what it is, it's a money giveaway. And the people who have lobbyists or lobby for themselves are the ones who get the money. So these things, again, that we're saying that we want, first of all, we have to know that we want it, then we have to say that we want it, and then whatever barriers that prevent us from having it, as an example, I often hear, well, Rodney, there's just no black people working in construction jobs. Rodney, you don't see any black people getting the contracts for construction jobs. Now, I don't know that to be a fact, but I know people have a concern about it. And because they have a concern about it, then I should look into it. And what I have discovered, that there is some issues with that. So I want to know, what are the current regulations? What are the barriers, if there are any? And if those barriers are adversely impacting us, somebody has to call King's X, otherwise known as bovine defecation, and say, no, we're not going to have this anymore. This is preventing Americans. Yeah, we're black, we're African American, but let's put some emphasis on that American. This is preventing a segment of American society from advancing like everyone else, and that needs to change. Or if there is not a provision for it, then we need to have that provision put in legislation, in law for it. There are rules out there. Think about sports for a minute. What sport has been created in America that once we've been allowed to participate in it, that we have not dominated? Because I'm not able to think
talk
of one.
about it.
Maybe you guys can, but I'm not able to think of one. It may take us a little bit to spin up, but I'll say, look at the time that it took the other groups to get as good as when they became good, and look at how quickly we became good at it.
But what is that indicative of? What?
Did we really have a bobsled team? Or that was just in the movie Cool Runnings?
No, that's true.
Yeah,
True.
Okay, say it again.
There
we
we
have
go.
what?
A bobsled.
Jamaican
Jamaican bobsled.
Yeah.
But they still have several countries.
Yeah, they do. They just
But they
were
do it
there.
for tourism, though. That's all tourists.
Yeah, but well, I guess
No, it is because of the Jamaica bobsled team brings the name of Jamaica into the the cultural dynamic.
It's money.
And it's money.
it's money.
But I mean, just because we're good at
Marketable.
sports doesn't mean anything.
No, it's not that we're just good at sports. It's the idea that when we're held out of stuff, obviously we're not participating in it. But what I'm saying is when we're allowed into these things, or we break the door down and force ourselves into it, we have dominated. Well, if we can do that with sports, and it's not just with sports. Look at academia. Look how quickly, once HBCUs were established, those once slaves who it was against the law to learn how to read and write, look how quickly those folks graduated college. Look how quickly they became elected officials,
of,
how many businesses that they did establish. We owned all the trades. We did all the farming. And we capitalized on that.
That's why I say, speaking of HBCU, what do you think about integration today? What do you think about it as a concept and possibly ending it?
I say we have to be careful.
We can.
what we ask for.
Wait.
Oh, I
We
thought
can.
you
No.
said-
Let me finish.
You
You
got
know,
three
I
questions in
paused
one.
for a minute. That's one of those pregnant
Yeah, three
pauses.
questions in one.
emphasis.
Oh, look, it said no.
See, that's me knocking down barriers.
No, that's it. Desegregation, yes, but ending integration as a practice. And let me expound for it because you're giving me that look there, right? HBCUs were set up. You know, Howard has doctors, lawyers come from out of there, right? But the enrollment is down. We're looking.
Our
at,
enrollment is down. African American enrollment is down.
That's what I'm saying. But it was set up for us, but our enrollment is down because we're into integrating,
No.
right? Well, let me finish my thought.
Go
Let me
ahead.
finish my thought. Now it's gonna heat up here. We got you, Rodney. Now we're gonna start shooting it around. Okay, so look, in Claude Anderson's book, he says that right after slavery, 10 years after slavery, you know, we had Congresspersons. We had 1/2 of 1% of the wealth in this country, in America. We had that. What do we have right now, just real quickly, what do we have right now in 2018 of the wealth in this country?
The same.
It's the same. So,
If you're lucky.
if you're lucky. So, but really that was poverty Still, if you're talking about walking off the plantation and then not being citizens and then having to work towards getting citizenship because the Constitution was set up for whites, immigrants, and we were the enslaved. We were the property within the Constitution. So we have to go through all this and build up to this. And that was poverty then. We're still in poverty now. By 2053, we may be zero as far as wealth, 0% in wealth. That's flatline. That means that you cease to exist as anything. Your opinion means nothing because you have no wealth, you have no institutions, you have nothing that people will respect. So what I'm saying is, you talk about sports teams. How about now ending integration on our terms and going back to building our own institutions where we can then begin to build wealth? Now, how about us ending integration, building with ourselves and raising our wealth?
Again, I think that we have a lot of myths about a lot of stuff, and then we base actions and decisions off of falsehoods, half-truths, mistruths. The reality of it is, we can achieve the things that I believe that we're talking about doing if we put forth the effort. Yes, it's not going to be easy, but heck, it wasn't easy for my great-grandfather either after coming out of slavery. So I lived, and I don't know if anybody else did, but I lived in the Jim Crow South. I mentioned that earlier. And the reason why, now moved to New York, thank goodness, but I found out there was just a different type of racism there. In other words, in the Jim Crow South, you knew that they had the long knives out. Up in New York, they waited till you turned your back and they pull the long knives out. So racism is racism wherever you go. It has the same impact on you. So I've driven, well, I was riding down where I had to go to the bathroom, and I couldn't go to the bathroom because blacks weren't allowed, right? So if we go and segregate ourselves and then they segregate themselves, well, they're already doing it.
And desegregation.
So I am not for that. What I am for is I'm for us to stop making excuses and to identify the barriers that are holding us back, because they're out there, and then go about the business of deconstructing those barriers, whatever they are. You mentioned HBCUs, and Franklyn made a good point, and I'm glad he made it. HBCUs are suffering because we're not going to it. White people love going to HBCUs because they're the minority and they benefit from minority status. So the reason why the HBCUs, a portion of the reason why HBCUs are suffering is because we are not encouraging our children to go. And one of the reasons why we're not encouraging our children to go is athletic sports. Because you go to a big program and you have a better chance of getting picked up by the big leagues. And what I'm gonna say is, let's go back in history, because I see Student Burley is about to take us there. Because beforehand, white sports teams went to HBCUs, and then they are the ones who offered our athletes a lot of money and scholarships to transfer to larger schools. And so they dreamed us of our top players initially, and then that set in motion that, instead of going to a HBCU, I need to go to this school or that school so I can get into their program. And I'm saying, look, how about this? What I see, or a version of what you're saying that I agree with, is let's take our HBCUs back and let's make them the powerhouse athletic institutions that they used to be, so that they can get that money. Let's go back to those HBCUs, so when you graduate and you go to school, the majority of our lawyers and doctors still today come from HBCUs. So this again is look, white people have been white ever since and before we got here. And they've been treating everybody, including us, the way that they're still treating us. If we want more, we have to do more and take advantage of the system. If you're in the game, you don't win the game by not learning the rules. You learn the rules, and then after you learn the rules, you go in about there and get Franklyn on the football field and carry that ball and start mowing over people.
I have to say one more time, we were always here. But, that's fine. Franklyn, integration.
What about
Ending it, yes or no? Segregation and integration is two different things.
Well, I don't know how you
Segregation
can end integration.
made you be free to be able to walk around and use the restrooms. Integration meant that you stopped shopping at your store that were the first ones to give credit and started shopping at Woolworths because now I can walk in there and buy things. That's integration.
I don't believe that you can do away with integration. I think that's the natural course of socialization of human beings, interaction, whether it's forced or fed. Even during slavery, there was integration because there were still slave owners who purchased and loved and married the slaves, and there were those who didn't. But at the same time, it's part of what the capitalist system provides: access to things. That's what you want. That's a human nature thing. It's not even a black thing or a white thing. It's a I want thing. iPhone sells in China the same way it sells in Japan, same way it sells in Compton. It's an I want thing. So you're not going to change that. And people are always going to want what they cannot have. That's why drugs are that way, alcohol's that way, relationships you just see even with 45. You want what you can't have. But the reality of this country, especially with capitalism, I wouldn't want to remove the thought of integration, the socialization process that Dr. King, in terms of the dream that he had. I think that is part of the issue because they were forbidden to do things. They were by unrighteous right. And I mean by unrighteous because it was based on a principle of color as opposed to what they would do when they got inside the store and things of that nature. So that's wrong. But at the same time, had we still supported our own, if you look at the other communities, the Hispanic, they integrate, they assimilate, they still maintain their own. The Hasidic Jews, they maintain their own. Italians especially maintain their own. Koreans, all these, you can go to other areas where they've assimilated and accepted the cultural benefits of being integrated while still maintaining their own. The thing is, African Americans, at least Negroes, because they're only Negroes here in America, everybody else they're black, but Negroes here in America haven't had that luxury of finding their cultural dynamic identity and then being able to sustain it.
Need to grows.
Well,
Need to grow.
Well, but inside of every need to grow is an African because you just have to recognize that, and it's at different levels. And even if we talked about the CBC, they would think that what they're doing is the best for the Negroes that they associate with, which is true. They're not worried. Not saying they're not worried. Their not major concern is those who can't benefit from the implementations of laws that they create. Most black people can't benefit from them. There's a small segment that can. And that's what comes on the heels of being integrated. You guys, I forgot the brother's name. Pierce. Is it Pierce or Brian? I'm getting old. In college, I met this guy. He was the only African American in the Reagan cabinet. Right? And I forgot. But anyway, I'm ready to chop the guy up. And the bottom line is, he came to school, he talked and everything, so we were going at it. And he simply put it would be worse if I wasn't here. And that's the fact. I've been in meetings where some things are not discussed in terms of distribution of the publication that I priorly worked at. They didn't think it was important to even go up past into Harlem to get readers. They didn't because they didn't think it would sustain anything. They didn't think going to high school students, trying to get them to be future readers was a thing. But now where those numbers sustained at? In those communities where they don't have access to the internet, which is still the format of a newspaper. And in places like metropolitan places, even in our community, you go to the third world countries, they still post the papers on the wall. So like I said, if it wasn't, I'm not an isolationist. The original allegory of fire, would you go, if you were behind the wall and you saw smoke, would you go investigate it? I would be investigating that. But some people would say, on the original allegory, I'm going to stay on this side of the wall. I'm not worried about what's over there. There's no growth in that. It has to be growth through interaction. Interaction could come interracially. When you went to college, the first time for a lot of African Americans, you had to deal with, on a different level, white folks. And for a lot of black people, for the first time when they got to an HBCU, you had to deal with different black folks. Because as you just elaborated, the brother who I hope we can stop and play his little soliloquy about your man right here. We stop him, come back. But the bottom line is, this guy was part of the American dream. His family thought once they had an opportunity, do the economics, got a job, could get out, move out, they moved out. And when they moved out, they didn't give him any structure to know there were people who were left behind. And he adopted the philosophies that there was no resistance to his growth by assimilating into that culture. But if he could have left. He could have went to an HBCU. He could have picked up a book. He could have come to any of the Black History Month programs that we had. It's up to the individual to want to grow. And that doesn't happen with a lot of black people. Because even the events that we have, yes, they're packed houses. Even as we're going to do the MLK vigil, even he does his MLK vigil. It's not a lot of Negroes out there. There's enough. There's a conscious community, but not enough. But they'll pay go see Black Panther 7 times.
Working on 8.
We'll lay that alone.
Then the prediction of 2053 will ultimately come through if we continue to keep doing what we're doing. We have to figure out how to do something else, amend it for our purposes, for us to begin to gain wealth. Because as long as there is integration, we're going to have a problem, because people always think that something is better until they get there. And then they find out that it's not better and stopped by police. What you doing here in this nice car? What are you doing?
Would you have preferred to stay with the lament and the lifestyle that our grandparents had? It's actually better now.
No, once they began to have work, they should have stayed there and build the community instead of flying out of it. You heard there's black flight, just like there's white flight.
But they could have stayed and then not messed. Don't get me wrong, even though I left, and don't get me wrong, I'm from an economically depressed community known as Harlem. When I had a chance to move to Staten Island, I did. When I had a chance even to live in different boroughs of the city, I ultimately returned to Harlem because I recognized that was where my biggest bang for my dollar came in terms of possession of those properties. But I was in place to be able to have good credit, a reasonable job that allowed me to still advocate for myself to get a property. And don't get me wrong, not most, but theoretically, there's a large segment of Africans, of Negroes here in America, that are complacent to stay behind the wall. They really are. We got to take claim to that, because there's the Negroes who left, like the guy who we hopefully will play his clip. He went beyond the wall, and he never wanted to return. He never went back. But we do that as people. There's a lot of third worlders who come to this country who never go back. I'm not talking about Hispanics because they can't go back. I'm talking about people who can come back and forth. There's a large immigrant community. They don't go back. They stay here and they love. And I mean, some of them are Africans. They came here, got an architectural degree or whatever degree. I'm not going back there. So, I mean, it's growth as a person.
Well, what I want to say is more myth-busting time. We often talk about the Latino Hispanic community and what they do, and how, they have 3-4 families living in one apartment, and they go out and work, and next thing you know, they own the apartment building. If we would just do that. Well, here's the reality. That's what we did.
We did.
And that's, so for us to say we don't do it, because we're still doing it today. When my mother moved to New York, and she was able to make a better living than she could where we were. And from that little extra that she made, she sent money back home. And by sending money back home, it elevated the people who were back home. And then I grew very fast. I just grew fast and stopped. But I grew so fast that I always had clothes that were still brand new. And then when I outgrew those clothes, she boxed them up and she sent them back home. And then my cousins were walking around with some nice fancy New York duds on, because it was different from what we wore back home. So by her leaving that farm and coming to New York and getting a better job, she was able to help multiple family members out, with whether it was with money or simply making sure that they had better clothes for their children through me. That was our legacy, obviously, within my lifetime. So the things that we're experiencing today, we talk about it like, it's always been like that, and this is terrible. No, this is fairly recent in our history as Black people in America since we were freed. We always uplifted those who were left behind. And then when we got a chance, so now they could go and expand the farm. They could buy the equipment that they needed, and their farms got better. So I think that one of the things that we have to do is we have to stop talking bad about who we are and talking like we have not done things to help ourselves out, because young people who do not have the actual lifetime experience that maybe I have, or did the reading along with the lifetime experience that Franklyn had, they take those things and they believe it. And then they base their actions and their concepts of life from these falsehoods which actually brings them down and to make them think less of themselves. It makes them think that there's nothing that they can do. And I'm here to tell you, the reason why I keep mentioning my great-grandfather, because he was a slave who purchased land. He got on that board and he made a way. We can still make a way today. What you're doing right now, you're broadcasting basically a TV show, going around the man. You're doing that. We're doing it. And this is going to grow into something more than what it is. So we can do it. Dr. Dorothy Height, rest her soul, I had a chance to interview her, myself and Miss Angela Thomas, shortly before she passed. As a matter of fact, we had one of the last interviews with her before she passed. And during the interview, she said something that really struck me, and I want to pass this on to the audience. And she says, young man, I am so glad the civil rights movement happened when it did, and it's not happening today. And so, and I was a cameraman, I just stopped, and I asked a question out of turn, actually. I says, what do you mean, why? And she says, because we had something that we have either failed to teach our children today or has somehow gotten lost. And she says, what that is we were willing to sacrifice for people and generations that we may not have ever had an opportunity to see.
But that's a good question, right? If we could pause for a second. While you make these historical compounding statements, you know, if your grandfather you come from a slave background, and Dorothy Height, these are all things that young African Americans may see, recognizing the large demographic of your population, especially upstate. They're not going to know Dorothy Height. They're not going to understand the concept of you understanding Jim Crow or other things. How do you figure you connect with those, for lack of a better term, dominant society folks upstate who don't have the same demographic as you, know the same background?
Well, thank you for segueing into that. One of my talking points for my campaign. This is something I've been saying for years. Is the reason why our young people don't know is because we haven't done the necessary things to teach them. And I'm going back to us, D. Is we have to, as an example, and to show you the power, potential power that we have, because we haven't realized it yet, because we haven't used it yet. We happen to live in a state that's huge, but it has a very small population. But in that population, it has the 5th largest school district in the nation. Our young people, we cannot expect them to learn these things in their homes because too many generations have already gone by where they haven't learned it. So actually, the knowledge has been drained, right? One of my proposals, and Assemblyman Munsford, before he left, actually helped push a bill forth in the legislature that I wanted to go national. And that was to integrate and incorporate African American history and culture throughout all curriculum.
/ what? What is it called? I mean, just to keep it black, that's how we do it, because don't get me wrong, you know, the gentleman you proposed to is also in this segment that I hope we get to play, because the Republicans are working with Mr. Mumford. I'm putting that out there. You know how we do it. We have to get greasy, put my glasses on. But even as you said that, what he proposed was directly supposed to impact more melanated. Now it's called ethnic studies, I believe, right? Or character building, or
okay. Again,
you know,
these things did not happen. See, we want to keep pointing the finger and blaming somebody. And I'm gonna go back to Ross Perot. Look in the mirror, point the finger. Notice it's pointing at you, and there's 3 more pointing back at you. That bill had been proposed multiple times in the legislature.
Right. He didn't get it until he was on his way out.
Right. Once that bill went through, after the bill went through,
multicultural,
then they had standards, and they asked for the community to come to meetings and help build the standards for this particular piece of legislation. It was an empty bucket that we could form however we wanted to form it. Mm-hmm. And my push, unfortunately, at the time, was not able to get enough people to go. Actually, I got more white people than black people. But my push was, no, this does not need to be an elective class. It does not need to be a class. European history and culture is taught in every class that you take. Whether you're taking math, whether you're taking English, your science, European history is taught. What I was pushing for and what I'm going to push for, because this was a step, and it's a step in the right direction. If we want it to be better, then again, let's get out there and make it better. There's another legislative session coming up. But what it should be is where, just like Europeans learn about themselves and where we learn about them, which also tells us that we're inferior because they omit our greatness, so we don't get to see the many accomplishments that we have. You know, they tell us that Egypt is in the Middle East and it's full of Caucasians, right? And then we believe that, and then they create statues and stuff to solidify those thoughts. Those things happen because we allow them to happen. Did you know that if black people alone, not a Democrat could get elected in any of these districts in Northtown, aka North Las Vegas, and the historic West Side, there is not a Democrat or anybody that can get elected without the black vote. If we want to use these, if we want these things, then we have to use the system to get it. And it's quite simple. Tell that Democratic legislature that's representing, because most black people live in Northtown and the West Side, has a black legislature. Tell him, this is what I said, that we got to talk about what we want. We have to know it, and then we have to tell them. Tell them, if you want our vote, thank you for getting something, because it's more than what we had. But now that we took the first step, here's the second step. And the second step is, I don't want it to be just this and that. I actually want it to be African American history and culture taught throughout all curricula. The standards, African American history and culture, integrated and taught throughout all curriculum. Because we know, and there's plenty of social scientists tell you, that African Americans, when they start school, they are on par with intellectual potential as any other group, including the majority group. As a matter of fact, in many studies, we are more advanced. But within 3 years, that changes. Now, I'm not saying this is the only reason for it, but it is a reason. Is in those first 3 years, we don't see us, unless they happen to talk about slavery in February and Dr. King. But they talk about Alexander Dumas, right? And the Three Musketeers when you take English literature. Well, I had black encyclopedias as a child, so I knew. But most of my peers didn't know that the guy who wrote the Three Musketeers and the Count of Monte Cristo was black, because it's not taught. We assumed he was French, and French Caucasian, because everybody else that we learn about is that. Well, it should be specified that Alexander Dumas, the father of Russian literature, was a black man. Alexander Pushkin. But when you hear Alexander Pushkin and Russia, people make an assumption, an association that it must be a white Russian. Just like the drink, they got black Russians. And Alexander.
Well, since you're talking about Russians, let's segue to Trump. You get elected, you're there, the vote comes down for impeachment. Are you for, or would you proceed with legislation to have him impeached, since you talk about 45?
Well, if Mueller, depending on how you pronounce it, if he comes up with findings that are impeachable offenses by our Constitution, then I'm voting for him to be impeached. That's simple. And because we have to do these things. The issue with Congress right now is nobody has any cojones. As a matter of fact, it's surprising that they can even stand up straight, because most of them seem to be missing a backbone. Well, what I'm saying is, I'm going there. Look, brother, I'm not going there to be nice. I'm going there to talk the truth that benefits all people in America, Nevada, my congressional district. And that's how it's going to be. That's how it was. I want to give you guys, when I was in the military, I was in charge of an area. And this general walked into that area, and he didn't have his security badge on. And the only way you're supposed to access this area is if you have the security badge. This was a secure area, no facial recognition. You need to have that badge on. And the other folks, they was like, oh, it's a general, we gotta let him through. I put the general down on the concrete, and then I escorted him out of the area, because he was not supposed to be in the area. And it's my job, and I'm gonna do my job. As a congressperson, I'm gonna do my job. My job is not to, first of all, there's separation of powers between Congress and the executive branch, the legislative and the executive. The president is not my boss. The people from my district who voted for me, the people of my state, the American people are my boss. And it's about time that we sort of retaught these basic civic principles that we used to learn in school. I'm going to push that civics get reintroduced to our local school
So
district.
job's a good segue. You get elected, you're there. What would be your plum committee, your plum job? What would you like to, actually say you'd officiate with being a rookie going to D.C.?
So, like I said, I want to be candid with everyone. First of all, if with your vote and I go to Washington, D.C., this is going to be an historic event because I will be a nonpartisan congressperson.
So you're going after the Sanders look?
No, I'm going after the Rodney look. But what I'm saying is, this is going to be something different. And people have often said, well, Rodney, who are you going to caucus with, the Democrats or the Republicans? I'm going to go with what's right, wherever that is. And one of the things that, we can talk about jobs and we can talk about ways and means, but I know that when I first get there, I'm not going to have a choice of any of those committees. I'm going to try to have influence because I have a vote.
But what would be your choice, though? I mean, don't get me wrong. What would be your choice?
Infrastructure. And one of the reasons why infrastructure, healthcare, and education. And the reason for those is infrastructure is a bunch of jobs. It is a lot of jobs and good paying jobs. And these are jobs that used to be associated with us that are no longer associated with us. And I need to know why that is, what barriers that are there, and that need to be torn down, and what new legislation needs to go into place to ensure that we benefit from those good jobs. And our infrastructure is falling apart, so it's really a lot of opportunity in that. Education, for one of the reasons that I just mentioned, we're in a position where we cannot depend on our homes to do the things that need to be done. The only other place where our children are for 5.5 hours a day, depending on where you go to school at, 5 days a week, 9 months out of the year, is in the schools. So we need to beef those up, but make sure that they're teaching our children the things that they need, not just for the day, but for tomorrow. One of the things that I said was we need to do a needs assessment and find out what are the jobs of the future, and are we training our children for those jobs? What are the needs for our children to be able to survive in this changing, technologically advanced world? And then we need to make sure that the schools are training those children on those things that they will need. Again, I'm saying we have not done those things. We have not forced those issues. So infrastructure, got to be on it. Education, have to be on it. Depending on what I'm allowed to do or what I can get into, healthcare is another place where there's a bunch of jobs and that we're not into. And it also has something to do with our health too, because we're suffering more than anybody else. For example, the African American female mortality rate, infant mortality rate, just giving birth, we're like, and somebody fact checked me, I believe it's 3.7 times more likely to die than the majority population. As a matter of fact, if you took the African American statistic out of that, instead of us being towards the bottom of the industrialized nations, we'd be at the top. That's our sisters that are dying. And no one is addressing it, and I plan on addressing it.
Well, let's talk about, as we look at the clock here, we appreciate your time and energy. How's the community receiving you, but the youth? I know you work around with Minister Stretch and some of them other cats. How's that going with it?
Well,
as much as their involvement is on the peripherals, pretty much, do you think that they could push you or push a candidacy to the limit to be?
I know it. I don't think it. I know it because when I've gone to talk to the places where they hang out, whether it's raw remedies or in their schools, wherever they are, one of the things that they usually tell me is, wow, you're the first person like you that's ever come to talk to us. And then I asked them, and I asked everybody the same question, what do you want? And don't tell me what you want in nebulous platitudes. Give me some specific directions. And then if you're not able to get it right down to where it needs to be, give me a starting point, and then I'll help guide you to where it's something that's usable. I am going to establish for just talking terms now, a youth Congress, because I want to start working on my replacement now. As a baby boomer, I still don't have the baton. But I want to make sure that when I get it, for whatever short period of time that I do have it, that there's somebody right behind me that I could pass that baton to, and whatever progress that has been made, they're ready to go and take it to the next level. So the Youth Congress is a concept that'll, and I'm reaching out to the BSUs first, so that's a concept that these people are already motivated to be involved, to get them involved on another level and let them see how government works. Let them go through the process, teach them as they go so that they're involved early and they have a desire for that. And so that they'll push their parents. Because what happened in the 60s and 70s, America, as an example, had a litter problem, huge. And what they did was they started teaching kids in school to pick up the paper, and if you see your parents do this or that. So even though our parents were predisposed to do what they had been doing, because we were like, hey, Mom, I'm gonna pick up that paper, you shouldn't do that. That changed them to a certain extent, and then we grew up with that mindset. And because we grew up with that mindset, we pass that on to our children. So see, there are things that we can do if we, like Dorothy Height said, if we have the will to do it and we're willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to sacrifice. I have a proven record of sacrifice. Look at this hat, if you don't know. I'm in the community, not because anybody tells me to be in the community. I'm in the community because I want to be in the community, and I want those young children to see me, to know that I'm a child from the Jim Crow South, no running water, no electricity, not a single family member ever to graduate college. That's where I came from. I want them to know that not only was I in a gang, not only was I the leader of the gang, but in my area, I was the warlord of gangs. So this, what you see today, didn't just show up. This is something that came about over time with a lot of people investing a lot of stuff in me. And what I'm saying is, fellas, men, let's go and let's go to work. Let's stop making excuses. Let's stop. Let's stop pointing the fingers, and let's put them hands, and most importantly, our most powerful weapon. You learn this in the military, you learn it in martial arts, you learn it in fraternities. This right here, our brain, is our most powerful weapon. We have one of the best. Let's use it for it.
I thought it was vibranium, man.
Oh no.
I thought it was
Ceemo,
vibranium.
please.
The most powerful thing, Ceemo?
Ceemo.
Black Panther suit.
What you got to say? Anything to say?
Oh man, I'm here for Rodney Smith. I'm with Rodney Smith, definitely. And you know, it's all about, like we talked about, utilizing resources, reach out for help. And I'm gonna go back to my high school because I'm mad that they were poking holes in my history about the important details, certain things, you know, that I never went and found out on my own. But you know, now it's time to change that. So amazing. Thank you, sir. You guys.
Well, as you know, I'm going to close it out like this because Mr. Wakanda said he's seen the movie 7 times. The bottom line is, the Black Panther will be white in the next movie.
Prediction.
I'm putting it out there every time I see y'all so y'all know I'm going for the future. In case I ain't here, you know why they got me, because I told y'all the facts. If you looked at the end of the movie when you saw Bucky walk off it with T'Challa's sister, come on now, it's already over. That's how they got R&B. Elvis got to hang out with the brothers in the band. Ray Charles put the glasses on, even though they were still in his instrumentation and the figuration. But the bottom line is, as we just got to support Mr. Smith, he's taken the time through the course of his life, through the course of his time here in Vegas, to make an impetus into the community, to express himself clearly and what the vision he wants to provide by electing him to Congress for District 4. Early registration actually starts in a couple of weeks. We're going to get into some other stuff. But when you have somebody who walks amongst you, who's willing to talk with you and express to you what they want and listen to you, that's impactful. So you got to put that energy forth as you look for who you want to vote for at whatever level it is. You don't have to agree with it. We just want your participation in the vote. And hopefully the time that you spent by hearing what this man's offering, you get a clearer image of where he could take us and where you could be with him. So, you know, this is nothing but the facts. Got to say a big shout out one more time, Mr. Smith. Thank you again. Appreciate your time. And the entourage for being quiet. We appreciate that. But everything goes, and this is how you got to do it. Everything comes out of dialogue. If they're not willing to talk to you, you got to ask why. You got to ask, if they're willing to talk to you, who's financing them to talk to you? And again, why?
Indictment. And remember, bark at us and we're going to bark back at you.
Nothing,
Nothing
but the facts.
facts. Yeah.
The fact.